Perfect. Okay. Yep. I'll shut up now so you can get started.
Perfect.
Good each time.
Yep. You too.
Right, this is Matt. He's a co-host for our new radio show that we're doing in the mornings on Wednesdays. But that's all that's going on here. But that's perfect. All right.
David
Collins.
30 minutes. Show with David
Collins.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of David Collins' 0-Minute Half-Hour Show. I'm your host, David Collins, and we have another great episode for you today. I'm really looking forward to an exciting guest today. You might not believe it. Of course, Halloween is coming up, and I think this will be our Halloween episode, which should be nice. A Halloween themed, some of the things. I don't know if you have any Halloween games here. Of course, a lot of my fans will know October 31st, I like to go bowling on Halloween, so we'll see how I do. I'll report back and see how well that's going, and we'll probably talk about that on the radio show, October 30th. Speaking of that radio show, we have an announcement here. We've confirmed that we're going to be airing our live radio show, 7:30 a.m. Eastern, on the Blind Mike channel, beginning November 6th, actually the day immediately after the election. So we'll be one of the first people kind of covering the election results that morning. That'll be interesting.
Be a good time.
I can't really wait. So mark your calendars there for November 6th. And we're also going to be going to an event that night prior to that and doing some street interviews. So we'll be able to bring some original content there. Do you do anything for Halloween, Tom Myers?
I do not. I'm just going to go ahead because it's the election. I'm just going to go ahead and practice barricading myself inside my home for the inevitable results that come in. I'm prepping for that.
Well, that matches the spooky season there. We have a great guest planned for you today. Some great games. Of course, before we start all that, though, everybody's favorite segment, Color of the Day. Today's color of the day, burgundy. Burgundy is a dark red color, not to be confused with mahogany. Made of 128 red, 0 green, and 32 blue, burgundy is often associated with European upper classes and wealth. Even many famous statues are the color of burgundy. I recently went to a Halloween party there. I was in Omaha, Nebraska. That was a lot of fun. But the coat that I wore for my costume was actually the color of burgundy. And that's why today's David Collins 0-Minute Half-Hour Show, Color of the Day, burgundy. Our sponsor today, thanks so much for being a longtime sponsor. Of course, I think it's our only sponsor this season, Max Motors in Manhattan, Kansas.
Brought to you by Max Motors. Don't overpay on your next vehicle. Max Motors on Highway 24 in Manhattan.
We have a great show planned for you today. Of course, first thing, we're going to get started here. World News with David Collins. And Tom, when we have a guest on the show today, or any show, we like to ask our guest, when you think about world news, what are you thinking about this week?
Oh, I'm just thinking about like how screwed the entire planet's going to be because we're so focused on our own needs that we're not really going to care about anybody else. So
we always have this loop on when we get started here. What a nightmare. Well, that's perfect. Of course, it depends how your outlook is there, but it sounds like, is that news? I think bad news is always around the corner. What I'm thinking about this week is, and we might actually have this a little late, so it might be old news at this point, but I was just seeing Donald Trump at McDonald's serving fries. Did you see that?
I did see that. Yes, it was watching him do a press conference from a drive-through window is definitely a new level of cringe in terms of political campaigning.
Oh, press conference? That would have been a brilliant idea. I thought it made a lot of sense for him to be there. His hair is already the double arches.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's good to see him serving fries instead of evictions, if you ask me. That's what I think. I thought it was a very pleasant. I like seeing some of these politicians hitting the grindstone, like some regular folks there. I wonder if any of the customers ask him for their order to be super lied.
I love it.
Did you see that? What do you think about that? Did you get any fries, or would you say, "Oh, Donald Trump's there. I'm going to protest my order today"? I personally don't eat McDonald's too often. I try to avoid it, like the plague, some might say.
I wouldn't be as uptight about it as possible because as old as he is, he's not going to be able to come in my food.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh, he might slobber in it, though, if you're talking about old age. On other news there, of course, Kamala Harris, the other side of the spectrum, SNL character Mary Catherine Gallagher gives Kamala some encouraging words before appearing at the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner. Did you see that? What did you think about that sketch? I always like seeing some old characters from SNL being brought out of the woodwork.
I enjoyed it, and it was sort of refreshing that, in my mind, that Kamala didn't go to the Al Smith dinner because, like, she's out campaigning, and it would sort of defeat the purpose of campaigning, trying to reach people by attending a dinner uh, uh, filled with people
Catholics.
who are so rich that they're not that only they can afford to go to an event that you and I will never be able to afford to go to.
Right. Well, Jim Gaffigan there did a good ribbing. Did you catch that? What do you think? Would you ever do that role that Jim Gaffigan there, going to give all these upper class people, some of their taste of their own medicine, you might say?
Only if I got paid so much money that I would never have to work or show my face in public again.
Certainly. Well, in Jim Gaffigan's scenario, I wonder what he did get paid for that. He might have just taken it on the arm. As long as we're bringing back old characters, I thought it'd be great if Kamala opened her next speech lighting a joint with Garth.
That would be awesome. That would make I already submitted my ballot here in Maryland and voted for her. That would make me vote for her again, even more. I would vote for her like 5 times.
Be
if she
careful with
did
words
that.
like that. You'll start a conspiracy there. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see this? You hear about this? In Chicago suburbs there, somebody else won $1 million lottery ticket from the Jewel Osco. Did you hear that? You see this? It's more local for us, of course, in Chicago area, because we're located in Iowa more recently. That was nice to see. It probably marks the first uplifting story coming out of Chicago this year.
Probably the most uplifting story coming out of Chicago, I think, since the Cubs won the World Series. That was pretty uplifting.
Oh, 110 years ago.
115, 116, I think.
Oh, that's good. Usually it's me doing the fact checking here. Did you hear this about the former Abercrombie CEO, Abercrombie and Finch? Did you see this? You hear about this?
I have not, but I imagine you're going to tell me.
Well, this is kind of big news here. I'm sure you would have seen it after you got off the show with me. It's kind of erupting as we speak. Mike Jeffries, the CEO, you might say former CEO now, of Abercrombie, was arrested for federal sex trafficking and interstate prostitution. He could end up serving 20 years if that case goes all the way.
That does make sense, as I think every single time I've gone into an Abercrombie and Fitch, P. Diddy's music's been playing over the loudspeaker.
Wow. I was pretty relieved to hear that it was just a sex trafficking case, and it was somebody that wasn't formally a Democratic donor.
Me too. I'm very relieved at that as well.
Isn't that something? It always seems to be that way. I'm not really sure what's going on there. 20 years, that would be a long time. Did you think we missed anything this week? It was kind of a short news week.
Oh,
you do a bit of a political show, don't you?
It's partly political, part social issues.
I see.
I'm sure a whole bunch of stuff will happen between. I'm taping my show after this, so I'm sure a lot of stuff will happen in between this taping and mine. So I'm looking forward to it.
Certainly. Well, this is going to be a bit delayed. I hope you don't take any of these jokes that we use, and then we get accused of, I guess you've just admitted that your show will tape afterwards. So that's perfect. I appreciate you mentioning that. And that was World News with David Collins. Today's guest is a comedy veteran, performing stand-up comedy for the majority of my lifetime. He started in Baltimore and has since worked great venues all over the Northeast and Middle America. More than I could name in the course of this entire program, probably. He hosts his own show, Tom Myers versus the World, that we actually played a clip from last year. I forget the context of that. I'm not really sure. And I think he may be the only person that we've had on the show who's had a joke that's included in one of our games, Finish the Punchline. He's recorded 3 albums, worked with famous comedians, and is now appearing on David Collins' 0 Minute Half Hour show. Please welcome our great guest today, Tom Myers.
Everybody, please thank you. You're very too kind. I do owe a couple of,
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I do owe a couple of corrections.
And that's something I was going to ask you about. Actually, you mentioned before the show, you thought you were Jerry, which is very funny to me. Of course, he looks nothing like Jerry. But Jerry has recently left us, and we had to let him go due to some issues that he was having with the YouTube comments and some other pranks that he was pulling and things. But Jerry used to do a lot of these notes, and especially those introductions, and he was pretty good at those. And I'm worried that we might need some corrections. So what did we get wrong there? I'm guessing a number of albums.
I have 4 albums. There's always one that it's a studio album, so that always gets mixed up. So I'll let you go for that. And it's Tom Myers versus the rest of the world. For those of you, if you're obsessed with Googling, am I not part of the world, David? Is that what are you trying to throw shade at me for that?
Oh, is that what that's what I was wondering? What other world are you? What world is covered, and you're covering the rest of it?
Oh no, it's the world inside my own head, which is
Wait.
incredibly scary.
Speaking of Jerry, we really want to learn more about that show that you run. But Jerry, of course, we let him go, and he joined up incidentally. I'm not really sure how they got in contact with each other, but we had somebody that was pranking the show last year, the Gas Cap Criminal, and Jerry recently stole the 3 from our show, David Collins' 30-minute half-hour show, and gave it to the Gas Cap Criminal. I was able to talk to the Gas Cap Criminal yesterday, so let's listen to that phone call here.
Oh, hey there.
Hey there, David.
I'm glad I caught you this time.
Not posting episodes won't get your 3 back, David Collins.
Well, it has nothing to do with you. We're a little backed up with Ray DeVito's episode. Tomorrow I'll be recording with Tom Myers.
Well, it's your lucky day. The 3 hasn't moved. It is still in the same place as last week.
Okay. Thanks for the update, I guess.
Wait, I'll give another clue.
That's perfect.
Is it? After dropping off the 3, we went 2 hours north and visited a Christian retreat. On the way, we drove through a cemetery named after one of Ray DeVito's favorite colors.
Okay, well, I gotta go. Tell Jerry I said hello.
Will do, and good luck.
Perfect. Well, of course, last week we had a pretty cryptic clue with that Ray DeVito fellow, and the Gas Cap Criminal just left us a voicemail, so I'm glad that he didn't move it. It's a little confusing when we're backed up on the episodes, and he's moving the 3 before we even get to release the episode.
One podcaster to another, I am going to send positive vibes that you get your 3 back, because I'm a little miffed that the 3 isn't in your podcast title. Maybe the 3 is where that word rest of in Tom Myers versus the rest of the world is.
Well, that's interesting. And I actually wanted to ask you a question here. Well, first, yeah, no, you're right. Actually, it's a big issue with the branding. So we are concerned about that. Now, Tom Myers, our next guest, hopefully, if he gives me a phone call, I've recently been harassing our next guest that we're having on, hopefully, in a couple of weeks here, Tom Garland. He's a Iowa comedian primarily. He's also done a lot of comedy in Las Vegas and probably a lot of the areas in between. Tom Garland, and I've kind of been harassing him. He's a producer on a movie, so I've been randomly getting invited. I know another producer on the movie, so I've been randomly showing up to some editing and previews of the movie and harassing Tom Garland and saying, when are you going to give me that phone call? But he shared, I said, oh, Tom Myers is going to be a guest on the show. He actually shared a story about you, Tom. Do you remember Tom Garland?
I remember Tom Garland. He's a good guy. He and I did a couple shows together in Las Vegas. It was a fun time. I enjoyed working with him.
That's what he said. He claims that he brought you to your first strip club.
My first strip club that night, probably, but I have been to previous strip clubs. But my
What's your
first
favorite thing about a strip club?
It sure as shit ain't the food, because I don't want to know what goes on in those kitchens.
Right.
You drink and forget that you were there the next morning. That's
no shade to Tom Garland. I bet he would have the opposite answer.
I mean, you know what? Tom Garland's he's more successful than I am, so if he has a different answer, he must be doing something right, and I'm not.
Well, that's an interesting way to describe him. We'll be looking forward to having him on the show and kind of asking him about that success. Who are some of the other comedians that you've worked with? If you had to pick maybe 3 most favorite comedians that you've had the opportunity, besides Tom Garland, of course.
Besides Tom Garland, well, I worked with one of my favorite comedians is a comedian out of the Kansas City area, James Johan. You may have crossed paths with him, or
James
Johan, the rural genius. He's one. Michael Godot. He's based out of Las Vegas.
We may have to ask you more about that. I actually think we have a similar question a little later in the show. I don't mean to cut you off. Of course, that sound means it's time for our first game. And I know that we did let you know. We do play games on this show, of course, and we try to gear them towards the guest. But this first game I was really looking forward to. It's called Vaughn and Wilson Movie Grab Bag. So we're going to play a clip from a few movies here, one at a time, round 1, round 2, and round 3. And they're all movies with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. And you're going to have to guess just by that 20-second scene, what movie was that from? Are you ready to play Vaughn and Wilson Movie Grab Bag?
A lot of the Vaughn and Wilson movies that came out were during my drinking days, which I blacked out a lot. So this should be a fun game.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, maybe it will bring back some memories. That'd be interesting. What's a good drinking? I bet you could play a lot of good drinking games with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson movies.
If I wasn't sober, I probably could.
Oh, I didn't know that about you, Tom. Maybe we'll have to ask that. You know, our last few guests, I think, have been sober, except Ray DeVito. He's definitely not sober.
No.
Why don't we jump into? Oh, are you familiar with Ray DeVito? I think we're going to ask that later in the show. Why don't we jump into round 1 here?
Yep. Okay.
Well, let's talk about it. I'm a good listener.
I'm not in a place to discuss what happened, okay? I felt like Jodie Foster and the accused last night. I'm gonna go home, see Dr. Finkelstein, and I'm gonna tell him we got a whole new bag of issues. We can forget about Mom for a while. I'm gonna go.
What movie was that from? Vaughn and Wilson, movie grab bag. What movie was that from? A lot of drinking in this movie, I think.
I would have to say Wedding Crashers.
Well, that's a good warm up there. That was Wedding Crashers, of course. One of their most famous movies. You know, I follow a Facebook page of people that own hundreds of copies of Wedding Crashers, and they've never seen the movie. Isn't that an interesting page?
I own several copies of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and I've only seen the movie like 4 times, so I can relate.
Wow. Do you watch it just one copy each?
I'm working my way through each copy. Yeah, I hope to have them all, with my schedule, I hope to have them all watched by, I say, 2048.
Fascinating. Why don't we jump into round 2 here?
Line that's happening.
Online. Quick interjection. When you keep saying on the line, you do mean online.
Stuart, don't do that. You don't do that to a man. He's got $1 million idea right here.
$1 billion idea.
Even better, let him flow. Nick, I appreciate it. You can't bring me down. I'm too positive. Come here, let me share something with you.
Nah.
Please, come. I'm gonna explain this to you in a way that's visual.
He's bigger than you. Be careful.
Vaughn and Wilson, movie grab bag. You know what I learned while doing some research on these? There aren't a lot of movies where they both play the lead role. But there are certainly a handful. What do you think that movie might be? Now, I'll give you a clue. This came out a little later than I think. Wedding Crashers is certainly more recent.
See, I've never seen, don't watch a lot of movies, never seen too many of them. I have no idea. I'm
We
sorry.
had a friend of the show, Austin Ingalls, on the show. He referred to himself as a cinephile, which I thought was a little risky for him.
So it's Pee Wee Herman.
It was not Pee Wee Herman. And unfortunately, I think you've ran out of time there. The answer to that was The Internship.
Okay, all right.
That's a great scene where Vince Vaughn suggests they create the app Instagram, and all the other interns are saying that app already exists.
Isn't that always the case? It's like you think of a good joke, it's like, someone's already thought of it. Damn it.
Oh, that's a great way to compare it there. That's kind of an astute comparison. Why don't we jump into round 3 here?
All right? You are in charge of this area right here. The clubs come out, but they gotta go back in. Now, I realize this is a very complex procedure, but it's up to you to manage the whole business. You got that, Nipsey? Yes, sir. I should make you run your ass back to the driving range and get it. Just give me the wedge.
Now, boy, this is a tough one. Admittedly, I've actually never seen this movie. What do you think that movie was? Do you like this game?
Honestly, it depends on how it goes. Being a Baltimore sports fan, if we do really
Right.
bad at games, we say they suck. But you know what? My mind's open.
Oh, well, I hope you do well on this last one. What do you think that movie was?
We talk about golf stuff. So is it the remake of Tin Cup?
It is not, but maybe the people will have to answer me at home. If this is a remake, and I think it might be, make sure you email me, dc30minutehalfhour@gmail.com, because I think this was a remake. Starsky and Hutch.
Oh, okay. All right.
Starsky and Hutch. It's a Ben Stiller movie. One of my favorites. I think one of my biggest comedy influences are from the Ben Stiller Show. Do you watch that show?
I've never. I'm familiar with Jerry Stiller on his role on Seinfeld. The great role.
And King of Queens.
May he rest in peace.
I'm a big fan of sitcoms. Not a lot of people know that about me. Well, I wanted to ask you, Tom, here. How long have you been doing comedy? I understand it's a long time. I think your first album came out in 2003.
It was around that time. Yeah, I've been doing it more than 20 years. I started doing open mics at my college's coffee house.
Is it rude to ask you your age? Because I started radio when I was 18 years old. I usually just refer to that as how long I've been doing it. I don't really keep track of the number. But you say 20, about 20 years.
I'm 41. I actually started performing before at a younger age than when you got into radio.
Wow.
So we're both kind of veterans in our own field, I think.
Well, some might say that I started comedy at 5 years old around the dinner table.
A lot of comedians would say that because I think they're all emotionally stunted 5-year-olds. I think there's no comedian that's mentally in a good place. That's why we do this.
Interesting. Are you known for that? What do you think you're best known for?
Oh, I imagine you have notes there that are going to tell me, but I think it's a joke. It's called.
Well, we actually really. No, it's just a question, of course. But we did just have Ray DeVito on the show, and you two might be in a similar circumstance where you have an interesting split audience of people. And it's kind of an interesting thing to follow and learn about there. But what do you think you're best known for?
I think I'm best known for a joke where a guy goes into a convenience store, buys a bunch of random items no one would ever buy, says his girlfriend has an operation, and then me, the observationalist, I think to myself, yeah, right. What did she have? A bong hit transplant?
Well, that's a fine joke. How old is that joke? Do you still do it on stage?
I don't see. It doesn't. See, I don't really do a lot of stuff that I did when I was in my mid-20s. Now,
No greatest hit sets.
No, that's what the albums are for. Like once I record it and put it out, I think bong hit transplants on an album. Once that goes out, then I don't do it anymore. I always
Speaking of albums,
stuff. Yeah.
You have one of the names of one of my favorite names of an album. Matt, have you heard this before? He has an album, Words of Mass Destruction. And it was right around the Bush era where people were talking about weapons of mass destruction. It's a pretty clever, and it's one of those titles that kind of stand the test of time.
It does, yeah, because some people say my words never stopped being destructive.
Oh, wow. You know, a lot of other albums really don't stand the test of time. I think most infamously that Richard Pryor album, but there are plenty of albums that you can think about that you can't really say today. But you've really nailed it with that one. What are the names of your other albums? Did you keep that trend of cleverly named albums? Or do you think you kind of fell off?
I think I have very much kept the trend of albums that with names that will never be duplicated. There is Pitchforks, Torches, and Other Random Thoughts was my second live album.
Did you dress up as Frankenstein?
I did not. We didn't have enough money in the budget for costumes.
You might have done one of those opening sketches that a lot of comedy albums like to do. You're getting ran out of town, and then you ran out to the stage, and everybody's a mob at the audience, and you turn them around with laughter.
That's a great idea. Where were you when I recorded this damn thing? I could have used that suggestion.
I say that all the time. Often I'm talking about people on other shows, and I say, please reach out to me. I'd love to write for you, and maybe we could collaborate. Not a lot of people do, but maybe you could reach out next time you're working on an album, and we could work on a sketch.
I'm down for that. Let's do it.
We already talked about Tom Garland there, of course, and we'll have him on the show soon. I want to read a list of other comedians that we've had on the show, and I wanted to know if you've worked with those comedians and what your opinion of that comedian might be.
Go for it.
So, Jameson Cox. Are you familiar with New York's Jameson Cox?
Never heard of him.
Andy Malafarina recently moved to Austin.
I know Andy. I'm actually friends with him. I did met him through doing a comedy fight club, a roast battle. Good dude. I like him.
Oh, wow. Of course, yeah. Andy is a good friend of mine, I'd like to say, and he's actually been spending a lot of time with friend of the show, Tyler Wayne, which is interesting. And Austin Ingalls reached out to me the other day. He said, I just realized I've done 4 shows with Andy Malafarina, which was interesting. Speaking of Austin Ingalls, do you know Austin Ingalls?
No.
How about Andy Fiore?
No.
Joe Gorman.
Love Joe Gorman. Great. He's actually done my show several times. He's always great when I'm covering a non-political story. And his perspective is always a unique one to have and awesome. In fact,
Joe Gorman's somebody else that told us he's been doing comedy since his early teens. He says he's been doing comedy for 30 years. I don't even know if the guy's 30.
I don't think so. I think he's drunk from the fountain of youth or something because he's always young at heart.
And he's got a great mustache there. How about Chris Scopo? Now, Chris Scopo, I don't want to really badmouth the guy, but a lot of our audience was pretty upset with his appearance on the show.
Well, I haven't met Chris Scopo, so I can't pass any judgment.
Well, we had him last year for our Christmas special, and it was a great episode, but he kept moving to different rooms, laying down in different beds. It was very strange.
Very unprofessional, too, it sounds like.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, but it was strange, of course. Ray DeVito, you've acknowledged that you knew. Have you worked with Ray DeVito, or are you a good friend with Ray DeVito? There was actually a rumor. Somebody reached out to me recently and said, I think Tom Myers is going to be on Ray DeVito's show. I said, wow, that's strange. I have them both booked.
I thought you were talking about comedians.
Right.
Yeah.
How about this last one here? KP Burke. Well, you've already said enough about Ray DeVito. I think we understand your impression of him. We don't want to push too hard.
Never heard of KP Burke. No,
You've never heard of KP Burke? New Jersey's KP Burke. He has a new album coming out soon. Everybody look forward to KP Burke's new album. That's going to be great. He's a very funny comedian from New Jersey there.
I'll have to check him out then. Thanks.
How do you
for the
write your material?
I'm sorry?
How do you write your material?
It's basically like what my own observations, whatever I notice about stuff. I have a pretty unique and warped perspective, and whenever I come up with it, I write it down, and
So
it's
you do
either
write it down in a notebook. We've had this big controversy on the show. We used to ask this to a lot of people. Do you write it in a notebook? Do you use a phone and just type it out on a phone or an electronic device? We had a comedian, Donnie Townsend, on the show. Are you familiar with Donnie Townsend?
I am not. No.
Well, he's a very funny Iowa comedian. And often when a lot of like people like Sam Talon or Doug Stanhope come into this Midwest region, they reach out to Donnie Townsend to host for him, which is very nice. But Donnie Townsend once said that writing in a notebook is like an archaeologist digging for bones.
That's interesting. So what I do is if I don't have my notebook with me, I use the voice recorder on my phone, and then I write it in my book, and I
see.
separate it from either I use it for the podcast or I use it for the stage, because sometimes one's perfect for one, but not the other.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You know, famously, Louis C.K. never liked writing things down. He always wants to verbalize it. He thought he used a different part of his brain. I'm not sure if I really agree with that. Consider
Well,
yourself
he always held something that it was pen shaped, but not his pen. Let's just say that. It started with pen, but let's leave it at that.
That's a little edgy.
I've been told that.
Do you consider yourself a joke writer, maybe a storyteller? You know, we once had Dana Moss Peterson. Are you familiar with Dana Moss Peterson?
I'm not. No,
He once called
this
himself
show
a
makes me
rant.
feel like I don't have the my thumb on the pulse of cultural society in America. But no, I've never met.
These are up and coming comedians. You know, we catch them on the way up and hopefully on the way back down too.
I think I'm on the way back down.
Well, we'd like to elevate you as much as we can here, Tom Myers, and we're looking forward to that. But he called himself, Dana Moss Peterson, a rant comedian. What do you think about that? Or do you consider yourself a rant comedian?
I mean, I usually try and write stuff so that that I have like set up punchlines. I'm more a traditional type of comedian in that way. I'm not really set on doing rants. For me, rants are spontaneous. And if I have a shorter set, I try to not do those. Longer ones, you know, I'll try and experiment.
Well, a longer one, you want to include some of that spontaneity.
Yeah, I mean, you want to go ahead and experiment maybe a little bit with a longer set, and you have a crowd that's there to see you and that's on your side. But if they're there to see other people, in my mind, you just do your tried and true stuff, and then
certainly. Well, we're running out of time here. Real rapid fire here. Do you have a TikTok? What do you do on TikTok?
I just promote my podcast, and any funny videos that I see, I either react to them or I take their audio and use it for my own. Basically, I either promote or I plagiarize. Basically, is what I do on my TikTok.
And they don't care about that. You're able to plagiarize.
For them, it's all about the views. They go and look at the original
China
video,
might have
and
different
then,
laws there. I think China's famous for plagiarism.
Something like that. Yeah. Although, depending on how this election goes, we might be stealing their form. We might be plagiarizing their form of government soon.
You know, that's a great segue actually to my next question. What do you say to people that say political comedy isn't real comedy?
I mean, it varies. Like if you can make a certain issue, like if you can make it funny, then you know it's all fair game.
Well, Troy Rigdon likes to say, friend of the show, Troy Rigdon. You wouldn't be familiar with Troy Rigdon unless you've watched our #1 fan competition. But Troy Rigdon, he always says funny first, which I think is important. Speaking of that, you know, we have some callers from other fans of the show and people that listen to the show and even a couple of emails here. So we're going to jump into our next segment.
What are you doing?
I'm emailing David Collins.
David Collins and emails. And we have a few voicemails here. I think one here. Why don't we start today with friend of the show, Austin Ingalls, who we mentioned earlier. He always likes to call in with a nice little themed joke. So why don't we take a little listen to Austin Ingalls?
David, it's a sad day for all One Direction fans.
Right.
The passing of Liam Payne. More like, watch out for that window pane. Am I right? We're having a good time. At least it wasn't Harry. He fell from a watermelon sugar high distance. Okay, we're having a good time. R.I.P.
Well, that's a great joke. I'm not sure if I understood that second half. But he's down in Austin. He's on the, speaking of the pulse, he's really in the pulse. So if he knows better than I if that's an appropriate joke. But thanks so much for that call in, Austin Ingalls. What do you think about that? He likes to work blue.
Yeah, I think that's the second half could have gone better if he had said something like, "Well, we know which one direction he was going."
That was a joke that I did last week.
Oh,
So it would be good. And I warned him. I said, don't steal my joke.
noted. I'll write that down now. Thank you.
Now, we have a Jamaican correspondent that likes to give us a call occasionally, and we haven't actually heard from B-Dude in quite a while, so it'll be good to hear from him. B-Dude here left us, I think it's a Halloween-themed voicemail, so why don't we take a little, he likes to wish us happy holidays when the time comes around. Why don't we take a little listen to B-Dude?
Hey, David, B-Dude checking in from the island, and guess what? We'll get ready for Halloween, don't ya too, man? Me a go get out candy to the little picnic them later. Me have a big heap of sweets and chocolates, so you know the vibes are go nice.
Right.
Halloween vibes in a Jamaica, David. Nothing like it, man. But me have to tell you, me real sad for hear say Jerry get let go from the show. That one hit me hard, brother. Jerry's always bring a little special flavor, and it not gonna be the same without him. And me hear Tom Myers dey on the show today. Now me have to ask, how him write his material, man? Me always wanna know the comedian them come up with the jokes. Maybe him can share some knowledge with the listeners. You see it? Anyway, keep the show rolling, David, and big up to everybody a tune in. One love, me brother.
Well, big up to you, B-Dude. That was a nice call-in. How do you come up with those observations? Do you just go out in the world and look for them? Are you consciously looking for those observations?
I'm always looking for them. I mean, it's my brain. It's some would say it works a little too much, which is why it's as warped as it is. That's
Right.
one person's opinion.
Have you ever been prescribed for something?
Since I quit drinking, no. Like my prescription is a lack of substances since
Oh,
I
wow.
got sober 12 years ago. So that's I steer clear of that stuff now.
Oh, interesting. Well, good for you here. We had one last call in here from, I think we lost this name, but we had another call in. I apologize. You can email
That
me.
last
and we'll credit you.
caller, I have to ask, that last caller, was he half Jamaican and half Swedish? Like I detected a bit of an accent there.
That's interesting. I always say he's our Jamaican correspondent. I'm not actually sure his genealogy.
Huh. What was his name?
That's a
Oli
fast name.
Marley or something like that? Or
Oh, B-Dude.
Oh. I was
B-Dude.
getting
So
ready to
maybe
say,
it's Billy.
is there an Oli in his family or something like that?
He's often accused of being Irish. I say, no, that's our Jamaican correspondent. Why don't we listen to our next voicemail here? Like I said, I'm not sure who this is from, so we'll just take a quick listen.
David Collins. This is Dick Cole, long-time listener, first-time caller. I would just like to I just have one question. You gotta excuse me, I'm really nervous. Anyways, I was wondering what David Collins does for fun, and if he has any felonies or things like that. I'll just hang up and you can answer that off the air, on the air.
Perfect.
Or, yeah, who cares?
Great. Well, thanks so much for that call in. I'll start with the first one. I don't have any felonies, or the second one, I guess. I'll start with the latter. No felonies here. Do you have any felonies, Tom Myers?
None that my lawyer says I can discuss. No.
Oh, that's interesting. So your lawyer says to lie on job applications. I'm not really sure how that works. But his other question there, what do I do for fun? Of course, Halloween, I'll be going bowling. In the reality show, you'll see me playing a lot of pool. I'm a big fan of pool, billiards. You know what's interesting? They make exercise machines for pool so you can get your arm better. But even if you search billiard exercise machines, you'll still only get water-based pool exercises. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
We had one other email here that came in from, now I'm not sure about this. We had an email here from somebody that we've had, a former guest of the show, Carl Hamburger, and I believe you two have some sort of former relationship. Is that correct?
I don't know if you'd call it a relationship
or budding, maybe not former.
No, not a former, not a former anything. No.
Okay. Well, he had a question about you. I think he watches your show because he asked, "Hey, David, Tom's monologue jokes seem like he's interchanging the setups and punchlines. Is that what he's doing? Which would be interesting. It reminds me of William Montgomery. He's a Kill Tony regular, I believe, but he's famous for delivering the punchline, and then he gives the setup afterwards, and everybody laughs because it reveals what the punchline meant. Do you do some of that?
No, like I said, I'm usually I'm a traditionalist when it comes to it comes to my writing.
I see. Well, that's interesting. Thanks so much for that email, Carl Hamburger. That's an easy name to remember. I'm infamously terrible with names, but that shouldn't be too bad. How do you know of him?
So basically what he does is he just reviews my podcast, and my impression of him, I know he's probably a friend of the show, so I won't disparage him too much.
Oh, we've
Well, this opinion is the opinion of Tom Myers and not of the David Collins 30 or 0 minute
should get a
half hour
stinger
show,
for that.
depending on when this goes out. There should be a disclaimer for that. It's that I would respect his opinion more if he actually had like some kind of talent other than like regurgitating other people's material and playing. If he came up with some kind of original stuff, then
Well, that's interesting. He's formerly marketing. I think he's very good at marketing, so that's interesting. At least that's one talent there. But that sound does mean that it's time for our second game. Our second game today is geared just towards you. It's a bit of a shorter one, so we have 4 rounds of it. This game's called My ERs or My ORs. My ers or My ors. And we're going to give you names of celebrities, and you're going to have to tell us, was that celebrity's last name spelled with an OR or an ER? I'm sure you get this all the time. MYOR. You say, no, it's an ER. Are you ready to play My ERs or My ORs?
On behalf of everybody who's had their surname misspelled, let's do this.
Perfect. Well, I'm lucky that I don't really have that problem. Most people kind of spell. David Collins is actually a pretty common name. In fact, we sometimes have a segment on the show called David Collins in the Wilds. But why don't we jump into round 1 here? Round 1, Sarah Connor. Now, keep in mind, these are all celebrities, so of course these spellings might go both ways, but this is the famous Sarah Connor.
OR.
That's exactly right. Sarah Connor, not from the Terminator, of course, but a singer from Germany. Are you familiar with Sarah Connor?
I'm not, but since I got that question right, I feel I owe it to go check her out now.
You might have to look it up. I wonder if she's ever appeared in Univision. Why don't we jump into round 2 here? Do you watch Univision?
Univision. I've watched it when I ran a Mexican restaurant.
Maybe I'm getting it mixed up. I'm thinking of the European singing competition where they create new songs.
Eurovision. Okay,
I see. Yeah. I'm infamously terrible with names there, and I'm even a little dyslexic. It sounds like. Why don't we jump into round 2? Round 2, Ari Graynor. Ari Graynor.
Oh, you're tricking me by giving me 2 different pronunciations. Oh man, that's a trick question. ER.
Well, it's kind of tough to say. Graynor? Graynor?
Grenier? Is it French, maybe?
How would you pronounce that? That was OR. Ari Graynor. A singer from the band Mick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. The Disaster Artist. Oh, it's an actor. Is she an actress?
Actress, yep.
Oh, I don't know who did that. Ari Graynor is an actress. Well, that's all right. Why don't we just skip to round 3 here? I don't know who Ari is anyway. John Mayer.
ER.
John Mayer. Now, a lot of people will know John Mayer there. And if anybody else is playing at home, make sure you email me your answers, dc30minutehalfhour@gmail.com. That was exactly right. A bit of an easy one there. I think a bit of a giveaway. ER. John Mayer. A singer from the 2000s, also well known for his appearances in The Chappelle Show.
He's also pretty famous too, so that was a softball after that last one that you gave me.
Oh, well, a little bit there. Bill Maher, I wonder if that would be a softball. Why don't we jump into round 4? Jennifer Garner. Jennifer Garner.
ER.
Well, that's all right. Jennifer Garner, an actress best known for her role in the 90s sitcom Friends. And since we've lost Jerry, the quality of these games have really dropped. I think people are getting too many of these answers correct. But I liked that first game. Which was your favorite game today?
The second one, because I have a winning record in that one. Like I said, Baltimore sports fans,
Right.
so we go with the ones where we do best.
And I wish we would have asked you more about that Baltimore there, but that's perfect. We have reached the end of our show, David Collins' 0 minute half hour show. Tom Myers, thanks so much for appearing on the show. Do you have anything else you want to say to our audience?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it, and I hope this isn't a one and done. I'd love to come back if invited.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, we've had a couple repeat guests, and we look forward, maybe you can come back and compete with another guest that's done so well on these games.
Let's do it.
That's perfect. Boy, what a great episode. Everybody listening, I've been David Collins, and you've been the best.
David Collins.
30 minutes.
Show with David Collins.